how does this team work? It's almost like and I'm going to be so out of my wheelhouse with this one, but like a car engine. You can't just like grab like a Toyota headlight and put it into a Mercedes. It's almost like going to a mechanic to get your car fixed. A part needs to get replaced and it has to be the right part.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenley, and welcome back to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today, we've got a great Tactical Tuesday episode ahead of us, but before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show here. Some days we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space, while other days we cover things like trending topics. Stop by every Tuesday like today for a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something. It's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. And occasionally you get a mic drop episode from Matt where he shares something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and wants you to know. And as a reminder, if you like the content that we share here in the show, make sure that you subscribe for more. All right, so today's Tactical Tuesday. We all know culture fit is important when vetting a candidate. Yeah, no duh, Sam. Great job. But we also know what a company says about their culture is often a bit different from the reality of how things actually are there in the day-to-day. So how do we as recruiters thread that needle? How can we really get to know what the hiring organization is like so we can match not just the best on paper candidate for them, but the right candidate in front of them? So here to join us for this conversation is your favorite Tactical Tuesday co-host, Vivien, to get into this one. Vivien, welcome.
Thanks for having me back.
Of course, my options they're not even limited. I haven't opened them up to anyone else. You're not going anywhere. Sorry. So yeah, culture fit. That's such an easy thing to say, an easy thing to put in a resume. Oh, we want someone that fits a culture, but like, what does that really mean? And I know you've seen both sides of it. So before we start going deep into it, let's kind of just open it up with just like culture fit, recruitment, how that all comes together.
Culture fit is really how do the different people interact with each other, and what is the overall kind of like dynamic? Are people working together? Is it a bunch of just individual contributors that are on the same wavelength? So when they do their own thing, it just magically kind of like comes together. So it is, how does this team work? It's almost like and I'm going to be so out of my wheelhouse with this one, but like a car engine, you can't just like grab like a Toyota headlight and put it into a Mercedes. Like, it's just not going to quite work as well as you should.
Yep.
And so it's almost like going to a mechanic to get your car fixed, and a part needs to get replaced, and it has to be the right part. And so when you are looking to fill a position that is currently available on your team and your company, you are basically looking for either like, I guess you're doing like some Fast and Furious stuff with your car and you're like souping it up, or it actually needs fixing and you need to replace a part, then you need to replace the right part. So That's basically what cultural fit is. And during the interview, you want to pay attention to, is this the right car part?
I really like that analogy. Like it's so easy to understand in the sense of like you're the master mechanic that understands the difference between this make, this model, this year, what's going to fit, what's not. But you have to know the car and you have to know the parts available to be able to make that. So, okay. I love that. All right. So now that we have that definition down, I'm assuming you're starting with the hiring manager first. You're starting with your organization to understand like what is their culture? What is the vibe there? And then going and finding candidates that match that versus having a specific bar of candidates in your CRM or something and then trying to force square into a circular peg, so to speak.
Yeah. So as a recruiter, the best way to go about it is, what is your relationship like with the hiring manager? Because whoever is actually getting placed, they're the ones who are going to have similar interactions as you with the hiring manager. And so however the hiring manager works with you is how the hiring manager is going to work with the new team member. Granted, now there's going to be a lot of recruiters that are going to come out of the woodworks being like, hiring managers are the worst. They're not responsive. I bet you they're more responsive to their team members. And it's like, Maybe, but a lot of times it comes down to communication preferences. And we've talked about this in a few episodes in the past,
Mm-hmm.
where it's about how does the hiring manager want to receive this information? Do they want this verbally? Do they want to have it written down? Do they want to walk through all of them and like literally look at all the different resumes and things like that? So it really comes down to what are the communication preferences of the hiring manager, of the team lead, because that is who is actually setting the tone. And so then everybody below that just kind of needs to fall in line and kind of figure out how can I work with that particular person and their particular working style. And then you just kind of like work backwards. But as long as it's a fit in terms of the hiring manager, it's really rare for somebody to get placed where the hiring manager and that team member work really well together, but the rest of the team is like, what happened? It's usually very rare just because hiring managers do take a look at, will this, I'm not just like, do I enjoy working with this person? Do I like interacting with this person? But how is this person going to fit with the rest of the team that is already in place that I'm working with really well? And that's kind of what it comes down to.
Okay. I'm following. I have so many, not questions. Is a hire Okay, I'm going to ask it anyway. Is a hiring manager representative of an overall organization's culture?
Yes, because if, and this is something that I can say from personal experience, if the values of the company are ABC, but the hiring manager is not actually doing them, and there is an overall grumpy atmosphere amongst the team members of like, well, this is what the expectations are, yet the hiring manager isn't even, or like our team lead or manager is even not even doing any of this. They're not setting the example, they're not leading by example, then not really. So it does start at the top because ultimately, if the hiring manager is not showing up, not delivering, the team is going to start falling down that cliff
Mm-hmm.
as well. And so usually it's a trickle down effect.
Okay. Okay. Fair. So, how are you working with hiring managers to really start identifying? I need to understand your culture. I need to understand what types of candidates to bring in front of you. Like, what does that look like?
As a recruiter, you can talk to the hiring manager and say, okay, what is the one person that you worked with really well? What about this person made it really easy and a productive partnership where it was super easy to work with them, and get them to have like a visual of that. If they
Mm-hmm.
don't have like one particular person that stands out, they can probably come up with like a Frankenstein kind of monster, but like a good one of like, well, I really loved this about that particular person, but I really like this other thing about the other person. If I could just mesh that all into one person, that would be like the best coworker and teammate
Mm-hmm.
ever. And so you can start talking about that and basically just asking, hey, like, what is your favorite part of like who's the best communicator? Why do you say that they're the best communicator? What is it that they do? Are they slacking you? Are they sending you emails? Do they send you bullet points? Do they send you voice notes? Do they cover this in like a PowerPoint type presentation during their one-on-ones that you have on a reoccurring basis? What is your preference? And based on that, you can start kind of seeing what is important to the hiring manager. What do they value? What do they not value? And as a
Mm-hmm.
recruiter, you can jot these kind of notes down to then see, okay, like, but also ask what are some of the areas of improvement amongst your team where you wish that was a little bit better? Because this is where you can kind of tell what's not quite working within the team, what could be improved, and is this something that potentially the new person with a fresh set of eyes and kind of experience and just being that new person, can they spearhead this into the right direction almost?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, separate question, separate but related. Are you, once you have these things, these are soft skills, these are traits. Is this something that you're factoring into sourcing? Are you not getting into it until you're screening with people? Because actually, I'll hold on to part two. I want to hear your thoughts on that first.
It's not something that you can source for, mainly because it's not something that people put anywhere on their resume or LinkedIn profile. Every job description will say like self-starter and great communication skills, but nobody actually like puts that anywhere on their resume. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not something that recruiters will source for because it typically starts with experiences and specific skill sets. And once you start talking to them, you can start sensing, is this actually like a decent person that I should recommend? And then as long as they're qualified, recommend them. And then you can
Mm-hmm.
also note these are the things that stood out to me in terms of cultural fit from just our initial screening. Based on the skills and experience, they're still worth to like have a chat with just to see, because ultimately the recruiter is very limited in what they know about how the hiring manager actually works. The hiring manager is going to be the best one to make that decision, but as a recruiter, you can help the hiring manager kind of like have a better sense and like visual for what is it that they're actually looking for, as opposed to just they have the skills and they like them, let's go with that.
Mm-hmm.
But something a little bit more concrete, because you can get along with somebody really well, but that doesn't mean that you actually are like compatible in terms of working together.
Okay. The reason I ask, because there's definitely times you see traits with certain experiences or backgrounds. So it's like you go and there's like, if you were to go and look for people that were teachers, you can usually expect a certain subset of strengths and weaknesses. People who are former athletes, certain strengths and weaknesses. People with an engineering type degree, certain strengths and weaknesses. So I wasn't sure if that was something that, like, if you need a sales rep that's just, hungry attitude, all that stuff, not shy. It's like, do you go and find an athlete? If you want a customer success manager, I'm staying in the realm of SaaS right now, just for simplicity. Like, do you go find a teacher who's really good at just talking to people, helping them, wants to engage them? So that's why I was just curious how much overlap there is in like the sourcing to the conversation stage with that.
Those are valid points. The main thing, however, is it kind of depends on like what's the team dynamic, because those are
Mm-hmm.
more so skills related to the requirements of the job, not necessarily collaborative. And so, for example,
Yeah.
as a customer success manager, my job is to educate and train customers, but at that same time, how do I interact with the rest of the team? How do I manage up? How do I manage down? And how do I interact with people from different departments? Do I stay on top of things? Do I take initiative? Can I make my own decisions, or do I need to wait on things? And those are kind of like the cultural fit type things that you
Mm-hmm.
want to look for in an interview. And it's
Yeah.
typically the way that people talk about it, because in an
Okay.
interview, if they're very like team oriented and humble, they will typically say we did XYZ. They will use we a lot. If they kind of are a little bit more of an individual contributor that is a little bit more isolated, or they take more ownership over their specific contributions, they will typically speak in terms of like, I did this, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
But by that same token, you can also then kind of go into like, how do you make decisions? Do you need to wait? When you see a problem, how do you tackle it? Do you need directions, or do you just leave it alone and pretend you never caught it? Or do you jump on it and identify what are the issues, come up with a couple of solutions, maybe test it out a little bit, and then
Mm-hmm.
report your findings and then take it from there? So those are typically the things that you are looking for in terms of cultural fit, because it's the unspoken things that get done. Is
Mm-hmm.
it where are they grumpy, and then do they use a lot of excuses as to why something didn't happen? And then even with those excuses, are they then saying, you know what, but I learned a lot from this and this is how I would go about it the next time? That means it's like, okay, this was not a good situation, we probably need a little bit more info about that. But they seem to have turned things around, and they're holding themselves accountable for, I learned something from this and I want
Mm-hmm.
to do better the next time that I run into this type of situation. So you want to kind of like look at the mindset and how they look at things, how they tackle things, because that's really what cultural fit ends up being.
Yeah. That is an absolute pro move. So I'm gonna call this like you listen with two ears. One is like, what are the results? What is that they're doing? But then the other side is like, what's the angle that they're taking? What are the subtle nuances of like how they're framing I versus we, opportunities versus excuses, like you said. So I think that's something so many, like I'll be the first to say this. This has been me for so long, is I only listen with one of the ears, so to speak, not both. Or sometimes I might listen with the other one, but it's not the same time. So yeah, I think the ability to do that, I love how you explained that there. That's perfect.
And it's, you can ask questions to kind of like, are you honest? Everybody's going to say yes. Does that mean that they're actually honest? That's debatable. So you could ask pointed kind of like questions to be like, how do you feel about Kaizen? Oh, great. Well, obviously everybody's going to say that, because like everybody wants somebody that is continuously improving. But if you ask them, hey, what is one thing that you identified where you like wanted to fix it, and like how did that end up happening? And then you can kind of like get a better sense for they identified a problem. How did they go about potentially solving it? Did they just kind of leave it alone? Was it something that it just was in the previous company culture, but now they would actually love to have that here? And so you can also ask it in a different way of like, what is your ideal work environment? What is the type of work environment where you will thrive, where your magic will just like come together and you're absolutely in like beast mode? Like, what does that environment look like? What do you get to do? Do you get to tackle problems, or do you need something that is like really laid out step-by-step instructions and you kind of like need permission before you tackle things and you need instructions? Or do you see something, you jump at it and you just deliver results and you're a self-starter, or you like are really collaborative, you're great at bringing the right people together to a project and you manage that? And so just ask the person, but at the same time, as they're walking through their experience and how they have addressed problems in the past, how they not just even like team kind of like problems, but the challenges that the company was experiencing or the problems that that particular role was responsible for solving. How did they go about doing all of this? And just digging into that to figure out what is that candidate's thought process and approach to doing something, because that's ultimately what will tell you, do they fit into that culture? Because everybody at one company, they may do things differently, but the way they think about just getting it done is typically the same.
During these conversations, so you're talking to them when you're asking this, are you usually scheduling these for a half hour, for 45 minutes, for an hour? Because there's so much that you want to understand about the candidates. Like, you need to vet for just skills, experience, the usual stuff. But these are very open-ended, longer questions that you have to go 2, 3, 4 layers deep to really get into what you need there. So I'm curious, like, are you intentionally scheduling longer, or how are you balancing the skills, experiences side of the conversation and like length of that with this side of it?
It really depends, because a lot of times you can figure out how a person thinks by just asking them really good questions, not just like, tell me about yourself and all that kind of stuff, but like giving them a hypothetical scenario that potentially you might be struggling with and that you're hoping for this role to solve it. Just asking, with this, did you have something like this in the past? If so, how did you go about figuring this out? And just hearing them talk about this, you're not just looking for like the specific experience and confirmation that they know what they're talking about, but also what is their methodology and approach to this? What's their mindset of this? And so if this is a hiring manager that is actually a really good interviewer and asks good questions where they can listen for confirming that they have those skills, they know what they're doing, and the way that they would approach this particular project or problem matches with kind of what we're looking for, then you only need to ask a handful of questions to really know this is the right person, because a role is only going to be really there to solve a handful of specific problems. Otherwise, it's too broad, right? So they might have a bunch of responsibilities, but the responsibilities are tied to solving particular problems. And so if you know how to ask the right questions, then you can probably get it done in about 30 minutes and figure out, I really like this person or not. But a lot of times you do have to space it out into like 30-minute chunks, like 2 or 3, just to make sure that like the technical stuff is there, it works with the team. So a lot of times it's really good to just like whoever they're reporting to needs to interview them, and then 1 or 2 team members needs to interview them. And that way they can also have that like hands-on experience and conversation of like, this is the type of stuff that we're dealing with. How do you figure, if there's like 5 things that are urgent and critical, how do you figure out which one to prioritize? Because you obviously can't do 5 things all at once. And that's a very real thing that people experience in their work. It doesn't matter what job and position that really is, that's going to come up at some point. But how do you then figure out what actually is like priority number 1 in all of these, and then kind of like taking it from there?
These questions are so obvious, yet so many of us skip them. We don't think about asking, like, these are the ones that you're asking your team every day. Like, hey, do you need help prioritizing this? Do you, like, what are you focusing on today? Like, hey, this problem just came up. Like, can you help me with it? Yet in interviews, it's always like, tell me tell me about your experience with this. What's the last book you read? Like, yeah, I don't know. It's common sense.
Those are great questions. But at the same time, they're not going to tell you a whole lot about how the person thinks and tackles and how they actually communicate. So even like your one-on-ones, how do you prefer your one-on-ones to be? Like, what do you typically need from a manager? And you can and a recruiter can ask these questions while they're screening them, just to kind of like figure out, is this even a fit in terms of like how this particular manager works versus this one, versus how the candidate is. And so as a recruiter, you have a little bit of power in kind of discerning that. But ultimately, as a recruiter, the best thing that you can do is help coach your hiring manager on how to interview well and what to listen for. And a lot of times it's just put that visual in front of them by asking them, hey, best person you've ever worked with. Why was this the best person you ever worked with? What about this person made this person so amazing to work with? What were they doing? And then how can you look for that in an interview? Like if you were to interview this person as a brand new person, how would you be able to tell that this person is able to do these things and that you work really well together in that way?
I love that. Okay. That's a brilliant place, I think, for us to start to wrap this up. So I almost want to say like any parting thoughts. I think that almost is like the perfect parting thought though. It is. That's what I thought. All right, Viv, I love this. I'm taking notes this whole time, especially because we've got some hires that we're going to be making here over the next couple months. So we're growing. If you're listening, we're going to have all sorts of roles opening up. So if you're interested, let us know. Email Vivien, email myself. Check the loxo.co/careers page. You'll see Vivien's smiling face on there as well. But yeah, Vivien, as always, truly, truly appreciate you hopping on to go. Like this is such a, I don't know. This was one of my favorite conversations with you. I think to date it was a good one. So.
Yay.
All right, well, as we wrap, Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. If you like this episode and you're not sure where to go next, we have a link to the similar one. You can find that in the description of your favorite podcast streaming platform, as well as on our website. Full video episodes are available on YouTube. If you ever have questions, send them our way, podcast@loxo.co. And lastly, if you love this episode, please make sure that you leave us a quick rating in your podcast streaming platform. It only takes you 3 seconds, but it's going to help other recruiters like you to find us. All right, everyone, that's the show. That was a great Tactical Tuesday with Vivien. Until next time, bye, y'all.